Okay, what if the next big leap in computing had nothing to do with silicon? What if it was all about living, learning, biological stuff? I mean, what if the computer of the future was literally alive? Well, this isn't some far-off dream. It's happening in labs right now. So let me ask you a question that sounds like it was ripped straight from a sci-fi movie. Can a bunch of brain cells, we're talking 800,000 of them, living in a petri dish, actually learn to play Pong? You know, the classic video game? It sounds impossible, right? Well, the answer is a resounding yes.
And this isn't just some fluke, a one-off experiment. The very scientists who pulled this off are saying we've crossed a major line. Biocomputing has officially jumped out of the books and landed in the real world. So how in the world does this even work? To really get it, we've got to look at some pretty mind-blowing work being done with what you can only describe as brains in a dish. So on one hand, you have dish brain from Cortical Labs. That's the one we were just talking about, the 800,000 brain cells that learned Pong. But then you've got a Swiss company, Final Spark, using human brain organoids. And get this isn't just a lab experiment. Final Spark is already renting out access to their biological processors online. For $500 a month, you can run computations on living brain matter. This is officially going commercial.
But why? Why go through all the trouble of growing computers when we're so good at building them? Well, it turns out our whole approach with silicon has a massive, and I mean massive, power problem.
Take a look at this number, 20 watts. That's roughly how much power your brain is using right now. Your brain, with all its thoughts, memories, and emotions, it runs on the same power as a dim little light bulb. It's just astonishingly efficient. Now, compare that to the energy needed to run our biggest, baddest, state-of-the-art AI models. We're not talking about watts here. We're talking megawatts, hundreds of them. That is enough energy to power a small city. You can see how the energy cost of AI is just getting completely out of hand. And this chart just lays it out perfectly. I mean, look at that difference. It's not even a competition. The human brain is just a miracle of low-power computing. But the really exciting part is that third bar, biocomputers. Scientists think they could be up to 100,000 times more energy efficient than our current AI. This isn't just an improvement. It could be the key to making AI sustainable.
So how is this even possible? How do you get living tissue to compute? Well, scientists are basically hijacking the building blocks of life itself and teaching them to think. Welcome to the world of nature's logic gates. So when we say biocomputing, what we're really talking about is using the machinery of life. DNA, proteins, entire cells to do our math for us. Instead of carving tiny circuits into silicon, we're programming the very stuff that makes us, well, us.
And here's the basic concept. You start with simple biological parts, like a piece of DNA or a specific protein. Then you engineer them so they interact in very predictable ways, creating these things called biomolecular logic devices. And if you put enough of those together, you start to get the foundations of a biological computer. Think about the device you're watching this on right now. Deep down, it's all built on super simple logic gates, things like and, or, and not, that handle binary code. Well, scientists can now do the exact same thing with molecules. They can set up a system where, say, two specific proteins have to be present, that's an AND gate, to make a cell do something. It's the same logic, just running on wetware instead of hardware. And what's so wild is that this isn't just about brain cells. The field is exploring all kinds of different approaches. People are using fungal networks, mycelia, which actually show electrical activity a lot like neurons. They're using the DNA molecule itself to solve insanely complex math problems. And they're engineering cells with brand new synthetic gene circuits to make them do very specific jobs. Of course, the second you start creating systems that learn using human brain cells, you immediately run into some very deep, very complicated ethical territory. And the biggest question of all is the consciousness question. Centuries ago, the philosopher Jeremy Bentham came up with a way to think about our moral duties to animals. He said the real question isn't whether they can reason or talk, but whether they can suffer. And now, researchers in biocomputing are using that very same idea. The important question isn't whether dish brain is smart, it's whether it could ever feel anything. And this leads us to a really uncomfortable place. As we create these new kinds of biological computers, what do we owe them?
Do we have a moral responsibility to a bunch of cells in a dish just because they can learn? Honestly, we don't have the answers yet. But we have to start asking these questions, and fast. And to be clear, the scientific community is taking this incredibly seriously. There's a huge debate happening right now. Could these organoids ever become conscious? People are worried about the ethics of commodifying human tissue, even if it's grown in a lab. And there's a real push from the scientists themselves to create some kind of philosophical and cultural guide before this technology runs away from us. So even with that ethical minefield, the potential upsides here are just too revolutionary to ignore. So let's look forward a bit into what our biohybrid future could actually look like. Okay, one of the most exciting areas is medicine. Picture this. Tiny smart cells are injected into your body. They're like little living doctors swimming around inside you. First, they can sense the specific chemical signs of a disease, like cancer. Then, their internal protein circuits, their tiny processors, decide if they need to act. And if they do, they respond by releasing a targeted drug right at the source. It's personalized medicine on a whole new level. And really, the ultimate goal here is to completely erase the line between living things and electronics. The idea is to create these true biohybrid devices where cells and silicon just work together perfectly for everything from detecting diseases to helping nerves regrow. You can just feel how fast this is all moving when you look at the timeline. I mean, back in 1994, just using DNA to solve one math problem was a huge deal. Less than 30 years later, we have brain cells playing video games and companies renting out bioprocessing time online. The pace of change is just staggering. The promise here is just immense. As researchers like Caleb Bacher have shown, building these programmable circuits inside our own cells, it's not a fantasy anymore. It's becoming a reality. The ability to create biological systems that can react to signals with speed and precision just opens up a future that we're only starting to wrap our heads around. Which leaves us with this final massive question. As we engineer life to compute for us, what are we really making? Is this just the next step in the evolution of the computer, moving from silicon to carbon? Or are we on the brink of creating a totally new form of life, one that's born in a lab? The answer isn't clear, but it's a question we're all going to have to face, and probably sooner than we think.